Let me introduce my first guest. We've got Amit Chhabra, who's the head of health and travel insurance at policybazaar.com. Thank you so much, Amit, for taking the time. Always a pleasure speaking with you. Let's get straight to the meat of the matter, which is why would you consider porting? How do you go about porting?
Sure. So multiple reasons, Alex. One would want to port either because the premiums have increased significantly, and because of that, your current policies become very expensive. So at the time of renewal, you may want to look out for a cheaper option. That's one, and a very common scenario. The second scenario is that you may want to port because there are now better options, better plans, which give you more coverage, more features, etc. I think that's again a very, very common scenario where people who've been holding a policy for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they now want to move to a better plan, which is available now, which wasn't there in the past. The third thing is if you're not satisfied with your current insurer because maybe your claim experience wasn't good, or any other reason, maybe you didn't like the service that the insurance company provides, that's also a reason why you may want to port out to a new plan altogether. So these are broadly the three reasons where we see customers wanting to move to a new plan. The good news is that moving to a new plan or porting a plan is very, very simple. It's actually a matter of minutes. Now the entire process is online. So all you have to do is a customer can just look to buy the plan that they want to buy and fill a proposal form that they normally fill when you buy a health insurance policy. And along with that, there's a single pager form that you have to fill, which gives the details of the previous policy that you are holding. The key advantage there, and that's very, very important for everybody to understand, is when you're porting your policy from, let's say, one insurer to the other, there are no fresh waiting periods that apply. And that is very, very critical. Now, so that everybody understands, whenever you buy a new policy, there are certain waiting periods that come with it. For example, there are certain diseases like knee replacement, like hernia, like cataract, which are covered after 2 years. Also, if somebody has a pre-existing disease, like let's say diabetes or hypertension, that gets covered after 2, 3, or 4 years, depending upon whichever policy you have. When you port a policy, these waiting periods were already served in your existing policy, so no fresh waiting periods will apply. Which means once you've ported your policy, you can actually claim from day one itself. You don't have to serve any fresh waiting periods. This is very, very critical and very important when you are wanting to change your service provider, because what you don't want is that you change that you serve fresh waiting periods. So that is very, very important. Otherwise, it's a very simple online process. Does not take more than a day.
Understood, Amit. I do want to ask you,
all the viewers, your policy.
Sorry, I do want to. I think we're having a bit of an issue with your feed. But having said that, I do want to ask you about the data. Are more people porting? And in a sense, this is good for the consumer, right? Because the ease at which you can port would suggest that the insurance providers are incentivized to give you better service. Otherwise, you can easily port.
Yes. So, Alex, earlier about 15% of customers used to port a policy. Now that number has gone up to as high as 25%. More people are porting. The more important reason is, I think, features, and there is more and more.
Okay, I believe that we're having a bit of an issue with Amit's feed. But I think the point that he was making is that it's fairly easy for you to port if you are indeed of the opinion that you need to port. And one very important point that he raised was the fact that there is no waiting period associated with porting. So once you port from an earlier service to a new one, there isn't a waiting period. Let's try one more time to get Amit. Amit, you were pointing out that the number of people porting has increased. You were saying that it's now increased by 25%. What else were you picking up?
Yes, and that's to do with the increased awareness that people now have, especially with COVID. So things like hospitalization at home, things like consumable items, these are things that people now want in their health insurance policies. And as a result, when they are renewing their policies, they do check around if there is a
Okay, I'm afraid that we are having significant trouble with the line. we will be back with a conversation after this very short break. But in a sense, okay, let me try one last time. Amit, the point that you were raising, more people are porting.
Yes. So if you can hear me, Alex, it's basically happening because people are more aware now. And as a result of that awareness, they do try to look for better options at the time of renewal. It could be around coverage at home. It could be around coverage for consumable items. So different things, but people are now wanting to upgrade their policy almost every year. That's why you see an increase in porting.
If I may, and if we can manage to have one last question, which is that if you have an existing policy, Amit, is it better in certain cases to wait for that policy to lapse before you move and take another policy, or is it always a good idea to port?
So you can port only at the time of renewal. So you have to wait for your renewal date or renewal month to come. That is the right time when you should look to upgrade your policy. So at that time you should look for other options that are there. And then if you find a better option or a cheaper option, then you can look to port. That's how a customer or a policyholder should look at porting.
I think we've covered the most important bases. Amit, a pleasure speaking with you. Unfortunately, we faced a little bit of a technical difficulty with your line, but always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.